Hello everyone, if you're here, it means you like Dr. Myles Munroe. Our job here is to share simple messages from him with the world. Subscribe if you wish to watch his life-changing messages. Today we are talking about his message on how Christ conquered death. In this sermon, Dr. Myles Munroe explains why two things, life and death, are important. He says growing up, he was so scared of death, but when he came to biblical knowledge of God he no longer feared death. He says the following. The greatest gift God ever gave man was the gift of life. That is when the Lord breathed into man, Genesis chapter 2. That was the greatest gift he ever gave us. But here's a paradox. The greatest gift God ever gave man after that was the gift of death. You may ask why? Because man lost the life that God gave him, and the only way to get the life back was death. John chapter 10 verse 18. Jesus says these words. No one takes my life. No one kills me. He says, but I lay it down of my own accord or my own will. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it back up again from the grave, because of this command or this promise I received from my Father. Myles Munroe explains that in this passage, Christ did not end at talking about death, but he went further to talk about his resurrection, and that he always made sure he added the last sentence, that is coming back again, each time he mentioned his death. Myles Munroe states that even though Christ died for all humanity, we all will share and we will experience death. And the only thing that he did that we cannot claim is his comeback. He goes further to explain that Calvary made the resurrection inevitable. In his words he says, the death of Jesus made his resurrection inevitable. I used to be afraid of death, and being born in Baintown, we had beliefs. If you walk across a grave, you had to spit on your finger and hold it in the wind until it gets dry. And if you step over a grave, they say your feet will rot off. I was so afraid of death that each time I saw a funeral, I would run to see the band, but ran away from the hearse. The preacher states that the fear of death is in our culture, but yet it was death that made the resurrection inevitable. He further states that the resurrection of Jesus was the greatest evidence that man's sin was atoned. And that if Jesus had not risen from the dead, the sin problem would not have been solved. He further describes the resurrection of Christ as the greatest promise of hope beyond the grave. Here is what he says. If he did not come back from the grave, we would have no hope. The resurrection of Jesus was the greatest proof that death lost its power. Death is very powerful. And if you ever had a loved one die, you know what it means, especially if you went to see them at the wake and you see them laying in the casket and they look like they're still there, but they won't talk. Sometimes you talk to them and touch them and cry over them and they won't respond. Death has so much power that it makes sure they can't respond, but the resurrection of Jesus is proof that the power that death had over your mom, your daddy, your cousin, your husband, your wife, your baby, that power was broken. Some people don't believe that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. I can find you many scriptures to show you where it was prophesied that he would rise from the dead. That's why on Easter Sunday, you will see on CNN and National Geographic and NBC, ABC, and Fox Network and all the other networks discussing the credibility of his resurrection. Dr. Myles Munroe explains that Jesus predicted everything before it happened, because he was living in a prophecy even for his own death. And that he was actually a prophetic manifestation. He quotes Isaiah 53 verse 10, which prophesied the resurrection of Christ. The passage says, yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer, and though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. That means even though he is dead, he will rise and see his offspring. It's a prophecy of the resurrection. He goes further to say the following. Jesus explained to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders and chief priests and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed. And on the third day he says, I will be raised again. That's the part which proves he was the Messiah. And he kept on repeating it. They're going to kill me and I'll be back. He even timed it. In 3 days I'll be back. The resurrection is confirmation of his Christ position. He was Christ. Therefore, he was the greatest of all humans as recorded by Matthew 28. At the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Clopas went to look at the tomb. Verse 5 of Matthew 28. The angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here. He is risen. Just as he said. That was Jesus Christ fulfilling the word of God. Everything that the prophecy said about him in the Bible, he fulfilled it, even the greatest one, that is the resurrection. Thank you all for watching. We hope you've been blessed by this video. If you felt encouraged, please share with others who might equally find it encouraging. And also subscribe for regular updates.